They're gonna taste great. They're gonna taste great. I can hear the sound of Frosty's hitting me plate. They're gonna taste great. With Tony, my mate. Everybody knows Frosty's taste great.
I heard that kid died. Aiden. I heard.
Even ladies who wait, or a pirate.
Did you have the lyrics on your screen?
I did. Yeah,
you did
that
have the
was
lyrics on your screen.
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was misinformation and just people bullshitting. So what better way to kind of
kick it off with the Frosty's kid, who everyone at school had assumed had killed himself.
I mean, that's the joke among our friendship group now, is singing that song and then going, "Didn't that kid die?"
I heard he killed himself.
So, yeah, that is well, should we explain what that is?
Well, it was an advert, wasn't it?
For Frosties.
In the sort of early to mid 2000s, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
It wasn't 90s, was it?
I think it was.
I always think more things are 90s than they are. Like, the amount of things that I put down to being in the 90s, that turn out completely not to be the 90s.
Like, give me one, for example.
Like, a lot of songs, I will say, oh, yeah, like, oh, it's such a good, like, classic 90s. And it won't be. It'll be early 2000 pop. Like,
well, like, Shaggy, It Wasn't Me.
Yeah,
it's
stuff.
Probably a song from the 2000s.
Exactly. And, like, well, Hey Ya, and all this stuff, like...
Hey Ya was like 2004.
Exactly.
That's quite a long way into not being
This is
the
what
90s.
I mean, like, because I forget, because although I am technically a 90s geek, 1992 is actually pretty good, like, that's pretty much start of the decade, everything. I mean, really, I only made it to the age of 8, like, before I stopped making memories in the 90s.
Yeah.
So, it's actually, I wasn't that old when it hit the 2000s, and so I really was, like, pretty much early millennial kind of...
When Pokemon Go came out,
I think we're probably the oldest people who really can be classed as millennials.
yeah. Although the millennial thing confuses me because,
I don't know whether it's meant to be born in the millenniums
or you were raised. Sorry, you came of age around the millennium.
Yeah.
Because people say, "Oh, you millennials" to me, and I'm like,
I'm not. I don't class myself as a millennial because, I mean, the internet was so. I mean, I guess it's really the internet's a big driver behind the whole millennials thing. Like, I think it's this whole being.
Why is the internet so obsessed with putting people into groups?
I think people have been obsessed with putting people into groups for a long time.
Well, since the dawn of time, yeah. But...
Yeah, I think it's just continued, and we're still doing it. I think is the point. But we are categorizing more than ever now to an absurd degree. What was the list of genders that
I'm pretty so? There's the whole 72 genders thing, which I had heard a lot of social justice warriors talk about, but I'd never seen a breakdown of it. And when we were hanging out the other day, I typed into Google like 72 genders, and there were a bunch of bullshit sort of right-wing news stories going, "Oh, Facebook is going to have 72 gender options, blah 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 blah." So I read through them all, and it's just like, it's just getting as specific as possible.
Yeah.
Like, you could just say you're either male, female, or you're trans or something in between.
Yeah.
But it's like, I am a trans female to male, and that's entirely separate from a trans male to the opposite of whatever I think
when you get to that point, I think where you're basically heading is people can just define themselves however you want and just get on with it. I think that if you're going to have that many, I don't think everyone needs to have a label for themselves. I don't think that's necessarily important.
I didn't follow up on the aspect of the story that was, oh, Facebook is now like catering to these people, but maybe I should check right now, because I'm pretty sure there aren't 72 gender options on Facebook.
That to me sounds like
alarmist,
misinformation itself.
Yeah.
That sounds to me like it's just something for people to get outraged about.
But I had heard, so that's the anti-SJWs getting all angry and whatever.
Yeah.
But I had heard legitimate social justice warrior people talk about the 72 genders thing before.
Yeah.
That was just the only place I could find a breakdown of an actual list of 72 different gender identities.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, they're only going to be as useful as they are recognised. Do you know what I mean? Like, until that many are recognised widely, there's almost no use for it in the English language, unless they're really descriptive. Because, like, one of the ones we were saying, it's like trans male or I don't know, whatever it is. Like unless you had that, because that's pretty descriptive. I can probably work that one out. But if it has its own words, and until that's widely recognised, I'm sorry, you can use it all you want, and I'm not gonna know what it means.
I mean, I still basically I just don't care. Like that's the level I'm at. Like I don't really care either way.
I think the biggest thing, like one of my biggest things with anything to do with that is the underlying problems of discrimination, and really, what, like, the whole thing we should be aiming for is the point where we actually don't care about them anymore, because we almost want to get to the point where we're just laughing at the fact that anyone had a problem with people being different.
Yeah.
That's the ideal thing. The problem is, I feel like a lot of the time people first try and fight for the identity of that thing, and that creates their own group, and that makes them separate. And then that's just like where the friction is because that when you start defining yourself and like putting yourself in a group, then people have friction with that group. Whereas really, you should just, I don't know. I think people should aim just to get on with each other rather than get pedantic about stuff.
I think the fight for equality and justice and stuff is kind of, in a way, it must be more appealing to these people than the idea of some actual like legislated piece. Like you have all the rights now, and they're like, oh shit, like what do we? I'm nothing. I mean nothing now.
I think you're right. I think a lot of it is, because I mean I think the majority of people who fit into those categories are fighting for this. Just kind of, they just want to be treated as equals. They don't want to be discriminated against, which is great. Like I'm on that page. But then unfortunately the people who often shout the loudest, you're right, they're not actually fighting for that ideal world. They're more just like fighting for the sake of having a fight.
And it seems to me like the goalposts of what is considered discrimination keep getting moved like further and further closer, while like acceptable behavior seems to just get narrower and narrower.
Yeah.
And look, in theory, I have nothing against the idea of a safe space, because you shouldn't be making people feel unsafe at any point. But when it comes down to, I don't know, when the people who are defending against the bullies become bigger dicks than the thing that they're protesting against, you're kind of just doing your side more harm than good.
Yeah, I think that's it. Unfortunately, now with especially like social media and stuff, you've got a bigger like it's much easier for people to have a platform to shout out about stuff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, those people do shout louder than people like who generally are more like have more common sense. So
we have the problem with echo chambers as well.
Yeah, well, this is the problem. This is kind of a weird like outcome of the algorithms that really that drive things like Facebook and Google. Like, so obviously they serve a purpose, and the initial purpose is really good. The purpose is to serve you content
that you are interested in.
You're interested in, and that's like a really wholehearted thing. And at the end
my
of the day,
gender is listed as a girl on Facebook, and I cannot tell you how many adverts I get for dresses. I'm not interested in dresses.
It's still like, it does still tickle me that like occasionally I see your name. It's like, oh, Aiden's changed her profile picture or something, and I'm like, oh, good, that's still there.
Well, if Zuckerberg is going to take if the cost of communicating with my friends is that he's going to sell my information to people, let it be wrong.
Let it be wrong. Yeah, I think. Because, I mean, that's it though. It all comes down to advert a lot of the time, and like you've seen with the YouTube controversy and stuff. But like, so these algorithms aim to.
I'm talking about the ad apocalypse.
The ad apocalypse, yeah. Like people aim, these sites aim to push content to you, and really it's a good thing, because technically if it gets it right, that's great, because I don't see guff, and if I'm gonna have to see adverts to use a service, I'd rather it actually be stuff I care about, so that's fine. I'm kind of on board with that.
I like having ad blocker, because whenever I go on a clickbait article, the thing will come up and go, please don't use ad blocker, and I'm like, yeah, no, I win.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's the little victories, isn't it, Aiden?
Just imagine a pile of starving journalists.
Yeah, but I think, but the problem, the thing that's emerged from these algorithms is the echo chamber, which is that
you could walk around for your entire life believing that the Frosties kid legitimately committed suicide. Yes. Yeah, because if no one's there to tell you otherwise, like, how are you gonna know?
And because unfortunately, society also, I think, has slowly stopped, or it's more apparent than ever, and stop putting a high enough value on facts and actually being correct. Like the idea of, not a lot of people have this idea of being objectively correct. Like, they don't think in terms of there's two sides to a story, I'm just going to try and get as close to the truth as I can. They sort of take things in, and especially if it fits, it's just human nature. If it fits more with your pre-existing prejudgments, then you're going to absorb that information way more than something that's actually going to have to change your mind. And especially the older you get, you're going to be much less likely to change your mind based on something. So this echo chamber thing comes out of that, which is where people
you can't tell me that the Frosties kid isn't dead.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that. And part of it as well, I think, where is the voice in the media or the internet or whatever? Where is the overwhelming force that only cares about truth and objectivity and not some kind of agenda? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I think it's not even just necessarily about an agenda. I mean, so you do get people with those, but like, I think more than anything, and going to the bigger scale, it is almost an inherent problem with capitalism. Boom! Like there's a big statement.
Okay, capitalism has some problems. Go.
Yeah, well, it's mainly just because the driving force of capitalism, right, is to serve markets, sell things, sell products, be a brand. Like the whole idea of branding. Like if you don't, capitalism is basically the thing that invents branding, right?
Yeah, it's a very Darwinist system.
Yeah, and everything nowadays is branded. Like, and that's kind of what's kind of crazy about social media. And one of the biggest things about the internet, these kids are growing up in an era where you essentially, I mean, people have always been brands of themselves. Like you've always sort of, everyone has their persona that isn't in their, like what they are inside or what they think, and they keep thoughts to themselves and they try and hide certain parts of their lives and emphasize others. But you can do that to such a crazy extreme extent now that even people are brands. So your Instagram, people's Instagram page, they will try and just put out this really positive image of themselves, and to the point where you're kind of, people won't be speaking about the things that are important to them, or they'll be afraid of, like, let's say, essentially they now have a demographic they're speaking to, even if it's just their friends. Those friends are a demographic that they're trying to reach, and so you almost get to this point where people actually, like, let's say they disagree with something, they won't do it because it doesn't get a like.
Yeah.
I know
it's cool that you've brought this up because whenever we recorded our podcast last, I made some offhand remark about Ludacris doing what he's told or whatever. And the basis of that was an Opie and Anthony interview where, because I'm thinking of this because of the link you sent me this morning, but basically Patrice O'Neill
that is hilarious.
was on Opie and Anthony, and Ludacris came in because he was promoting Max Payne, the movie.
Yeah.
And they asked him a bunch of questions, and every answer that he gave them was very sort of middle of the road, to the point where they couldn't get his legitimate opinions on things. And after he left, Patrice O'Neill was like, he was saying that to black people, Ludacris is royalty, and to see him reduced to playing the game and just sort of not saying anything that's real because it might alienate the audience that he's trying to sell his movie to. That was kind of the basis of why I said Ludacris does what he's told.
Yes.
But after re-listening to that podcast, I was like, there's no context for that. It's so out of place. It's just like, fuck him.
Yeah, well, now there's context, which is important. But I think this is a really weird outcome. Is like, so yes, you got echo chamber in the media because ultimately they're trying to sell things, and it's basically because of advertisers, right? The biggest thing is like, when
the money men rule the world.
Yeah, so when the internet came about, like, people are getting less and less comfortable, like, or people wanted everything for free, right? They saw, hey, this is the internet. I pay my monthly thing to access the internet. I can get music for free if I want from, like, Pirate Bay, and I can, just do,
Don't
like,
you mean LimeWire?
LimeWire, where you just give your computer AIDS in exchange for, like, terrible MP3 files.
Morpheus. That was another one I used.
I was a good kid. I never pirated anything.
You were a square.
I was a square. I still am a square when it comes to pirating. I'm one of those people who believes in the bigger society and paying into it. But
I'm not. But the thing is, I've made some music myself, and people have come up to me and said, I downloaded your video from YouTube and then put it on my iPod, and I'm like, great, you're listening to it. I don't do is cry to people like Lily Allen or Lynn Carter and go, you're stealing our work.
Yeah. No, I think one of the... Yeah. I mean, that's a different discussion.
That is a different discussion.
That's a bigger discussion. Yeah.
The internet is great. Sorry, I derailed you.
Yeah, so basically, it's just this really weird thing where, like, just because of the very nature of... So we wanted everything for free on the internet, but then, of course, people still try and need to make money off of it. And, and also, actually... people who make money off things do feed it back into that thing, and you end up with better products. And YouTube's a great example of that, right? So you've had people who were able to build an audience that would have never ever had the audience without YouTube, and then the money they make off the ad revenue, they're able to put that back into the thing. They make it better, grow their audience. It's a really good system, and like essentially everyone wins. The advertiser,
and we wouldn't have Smosh the movie if it wasn't for that system.
Heaven forbid. I know, right? Like, imagine, like, I mean. There were some bad things that have happened
Fred the movie
recently, but sort of if you look at the 2000s as a timeline, it really kicked off bad with 9/11, but I feel peaked with Fred the movie, and I feel like
yeah, the nation has never been more like we were divided from all the terrorism stuff. But then when a terrible film comes out, everyone just gets together in bashing it.
They do, and it's a wonderful thing. But basically, my point is that it was great at the start, and in theory, it's good. But now it's had this unfortunate side effect, and it's because it's taken a while to get this extreme. But now everyone's so polarized, everyone's in such wide demographics. And it's taken a while to get to the point where it's almost shaped society into this kind of really pocketed, like really vocally, and they just absorb all these things. They get fed all this media they like and they want to hear about, and they're happy with that. And people don't want to step outside that bubble, and it's not good for advertisers if they step outside that bubble. They have this demographic. They don't want them to do that. They're going to keep feeding into that. Yeah, and it's all got. But I think
Hideo Kojima predicted all of this in Metal Gear Solid 2, and I think I've got Metal Gear Solid 2 on my mind because the voice actor who played Solidus Snake, the villain in that game, he died today. Rest in peace, that guy.
Rest in peace, that guy.
Out of heaven, all of that. But the plot in Metal Gear Solid 2 is that at the end you find out there's these AIs that have been secretly ruling the US, and their plan is to. And originally you think that their plan is going to be to censor the internet, to control information, to keep the population stupid, and they kind of like confound on that idea a little bit. And the idea is not to control content, but to create context.
Yeah.
So the idea is that people who have opposing worldviews, instead of fighting each other, they can just keep them separate in their bubble where they both believe they're right, and everyone strays away from the wider society and just retreats into these pockets, and when people are in these pockets it's easier to
manipulate and control. And I mean, it's all on a weighing scale as well. And I think also the fact is that I think this is how it always naturally works. Things need to get to an extreme. I think I don't think I've spoken about it on the podcast before, but maybe we spoke about it. Is this idea of just the pendulum of change and progress? Is that things actually need to get extreme and need to go to a bad, because there's, like I said, it started off with a good intention. No one saw where it was going, unless you're Hideo Kojima. But like it gets to this extreme, but because it's got so extreme, more and more people have noticed it. And when a big enough, large enough group of people start noticing this extreme change, you can put a word to it. And so recently, things of the post-truth era fake news.
I'm so glad that Donald Trump won the election, because we're finally talking about all of the dishonesty and crap that's in our media.
But what's really weird though, is so Donald Trump is one of the biggest perpetrators of fake news. He's one of the biggest liars and basically spreaders of fake news.
I agree. He has a very big problem with honesty.
But this is the weird thing, is that so he's someone who essentially coined that term, and he it can be used against him.
No, they used fake news on him.
No, I mean he popularized it in such a big way, because it was just so funny. This guy standing up here, who's you can literally watch lie, going fake news, it's crazy.
Why I really liked that as a moment was because people were, when he won the election, people started talking about Pizzagate and all these online theories that were perpetuated by what they were calling the alt-right. That's another fucking headspace. But they were saying that the people who voted for Trump did so on bad information. They believed all of these conspiracy sites and fake news.
Yeah.
So when they start, pardon me. So when the BuzzFeed thing happened with the Golden Showers gate,
yes,
Donald Trump stands up in front of the world and says, "You are fake news.
Yeah.
You're the ones who are lying." And to me, just the fact that it has got to that point of just open conflict, it's great to me, because we can all see each other for what we are.
But the nice thing is because it's now had a word coined to it, it's got popularized, and now we can actually start recognize it. And actually that's the thing that ends up destroying that sort of stuff, when you get a large enough group of people starting to become skeptical. Because now, when we were talking before about essentially where's this popular thing about it's just not popular to look for truth, in a weird way both sides don't want to be associated to fake news anymore, because it became an insult for the other side. And that is a very positive thing, because now we are, I think there is it's not the majority, but by far, I think most people are still very susceptible to fake news.
I mean,
but it's certainly more than there were, and at least it has been and also
even if 99% of people are still falling for fake news, if all of this stuff has caused 1%
Yeah.
just to ask the question, can I trust this information?
Yeah.
Then us as a society are getting better.
Yeah, and I think we will do, and also I think, like with a lot of things on the internet, we see companies now sort of coming up with like dedicated teams to dismiss fake news. You've got really good you've got sort of like projects like with the BBC. Like the BBC are coming up with like they have their own dedicated team to like fact checking now.
Yeah.
Like their fake news team, looking for popular story, those things that trend, and they will actively, fact check that and publish reports on. So it's a news channel, but what it does is it checks other news, and that's quite interesting because I know it's not going to be 100% right, but it's a good step in the right direction.
I think so. I just worry about how like who watches the Watchmen kind of thing, because if you're controlling what information is trusted, like at the second level of that, then but that's another system that is willing,
but that's the
or open to exploitation.
But that's like the fundamental principle behind things like scientific discovery and stuff. It's basically subject to peer review. So the idea is, and a bit like, I don't know if you've ever heard of blockchain. It's like a file system. Anyway,
right.
But basically the idea is that, fine, having one body that is like the be all and end all for fact checking, really bad idea because that's subject to corruption. But when you essentially, the more points you have doing that checking that are independent of each other, and it's in their interest to, you almost want to set up a rivalry between them, where they're checking each other as well. So not only are they checking things coming in, but they're checking each other against that.
Like, I trust the aggregator of fan reviews on Rotten Tomatoes way more than I trust the critics' opinions.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and that's the idea. It's like,
you know there was a Netflix show called Dear White People?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know if this is still the case, but I went on that, like, the critics' review versus the audience review. The audience is like 38%, and the critics' review was 100.
Yeah.
And then Iron Fist is like 18% critics and then like 85% audience.
Yes.
So it's just like, I feel like there must be a problem if this perfectly good show, not perfect, but it's a good enough show is 18%, and then this other show is perfect.
I think on that subject matter though, that's an interesting, because that's slightly different. But like, what's really interesting about that, and I've always thought for a long time, I've seen this like disparity between what's critically acclaimed and what people like. What people like is because critics are people who are into the study of film, and while as a general rule, good direction, people do like that. It's also the sort of thing where, actually a really simple movie made in a simple way, kind of almost made badly, but has a good love story in it that people really like, that can get liked by a lot of people, but critically it will be trashed because it doesn't use good techniques. It doesn't adhere to, like, it doesn't do anything interesting for cinema, and that's where critics are coming from. And that's why you get this big gap between, it's like 12 Years a Slave was so critically acclaimed. Didn't like the film at all. I thought it was really boring. It was just a depressing, like, 2.5 hours. It
did very much feel like Oscar bait.
Exactly, and this is the difference between something critically acclaimed.
Like 2.5 hours to Like I'm not gonna say that like it wasn't hard to watch and that some scenes weren't. If I made a film where I was just kicking a dog for 2.5 hours,
I know. But the thing is that because I had this point coming
Aidan Maguire compares black people.
Point,
here they come.
My whole thing with that film, and I came out the cinema saying this because I'd recently this came out just after Django Unchained had been out, and I watched Django Unchained, blown away from start to finish with that film, and I found it really poignant. But it wasn't the most factually accurate. It was over the top. I actually said that with a deadpan face, but just in case someone out there actually thought that was legit. But my point is that I was affected more by Django Unchained than I was 12 Years a Slave.
Because in Django Unchained, it was just so hard to watch all of those white people get shot.
It was really difficult.
It was just like, they have homes and prospects and future.
They're goddamn... I won't say it, but he came along on his... No. But I thought Django Unchained made a better point about the slave trade than 12 Years a Slave did. And it was because, for me... Sure, the story's one thing. Like, it's a true story. It's really sad, and I know these atrocities happened. But film can actually take you to a place above. Like, it can be spectacular and in the extreme.
Like, you can't tell me that I have to like Titanic.
Yeah.
Because those people really died, and disliking the film dishonors their memory in some way. Like, they're not the same thing.
No, and for me, the Django Unchained use cinematic techniques, like really good pacing, to get me feeling more emotional about those things. So he makes you care about the characters, and then there's that brilliant scene where you've got a lot of build up to it, and you see terrible things happening to these people, and it's all about redemption, and it takes you to like highs, and so at the end you've suddenly got this new like black cowboy hero on the screen, see, like, born before your eyes. That's really like, that's almost like a cultural revelation you're seeing on the screen, and then you're seeing like bits where Leonardo DiCaprio grabs her head and he's talking about the chronology or whatever it is, where he's like
the shape of their heads,
and you're thinking this is disgusting, and it escalates with tension, and it made me feel a lot more than 12 Years a Slave, because 12 Years a Slave, to be honest, desensitized me to it.
But also, I think Django as a character, I mean, he's had a lot of awful things happen to him before the movie starts, and he's not some sort of victim. He is, in a way, like a good part of revenge stories is this idea that the act of taking revenge, like, it brings you down to the level of like.
Well, he literally played a black slaver, and he like let that guy get ripped apart by dogs. And it's because he had this end goal in mind. And actually, it did bring him down to, in a weird way, Christoph Waltz's character was the one with redeemable qualities. Django, you can question on some level.
Yeah, I mean,
as to what he did.
And also, in my opinion, that is a more interesting character because he's not being held up on a pedestal as being incapable of making bad decisions or whatever. I really
thought it was very good. And also, just on a note of, when you pace things like Django, you've got a lot of like downtime, character building, and then these big spikes of action, thrill, and poignancy. Whereas 12 Years a Slave was depressing start to finish. And by the end of the film, I was just desensitized. I was like, yeah, he's getting hurt again. Like, I was like, this isn't...
It was like Passion of the Christ. Like, that is a movie where Jesus is just getting beaten up for 2 hours, and it goes, oh man, we should really think about Christianity. Okay, sure.
Yeah, no, and so it's yeah.
But then Quentin Tarantino is probably, he's someone who has fallen out of favour with critics at various points in his career.
Yeah.
Like, Kill Bill is an amazing movie, amazing couple of movies, but I think critics weren't really big on it. I think a lot of people saw it as indulgent and kind of more cartoony compared to his previous works.
I think there's this weird thing now where I've just realised that watching trailers and listening to critics before I go to a film, I just feel I'm way happier when I don't have other people's input into something before I experience it.
Oh, I'm totally with you on that. I don't even watch film trailers anymore. I mean, you know this of me.
Yeah.
But after I've seen the film, the first thing I do is I want to compare my opinion to other people's.
Yeah, I watch teasers of films, but I never watch the final trailers because I find that's like, teasers generally don't have a spoiler in. They get me a bit excited about the film and they show me some stuff about it and it keeps me going. But then final trailers, the amount of films that have basically been spoiled. But there should be a watchdog. I genuinely feel there should be a watchdog. Like, put out there that screen. So you've got the rating company, like, that does all the ratings. Is it suitable for an audience? And then there's the people who says, will this ruin the film for everyone who? And if it is,
I would love such a body to exist, but I couldn't be a part of it because I'd just be spoiling my own experiences all the time.
Unfortunately,
no one would ever.
Who would only people who hate film would sign up to that.
And people who hate film are the kind of people who don't care about spoilers.
Yeah.
So they would watch the Civil War trailer and go, "Oh, Rhodey's on the floor in that scene.
Yeah,
I wonder what that means."
Exactly. This is the problem. Like, it's so bad. It's so bad. Like, how much they put in trailers. And also as well, it's just this. It's almost like a clickbait thing that trailers have got into now, where it's like, we'll put just all the good stuff in, no matter whether it actually ruins the movie's experience, to get people in the cinema in the first place.
It's nothing new though, because Soylent Green came out in the 1970s, and the plot twist to that film is
Soylent Green is people.
Is in the trailer. Yeah. Like, you see, it goes. It's one of the most famous like spoiler trailers ever. But it's like, reveal the secret, discover the secret of Soylent Green, and the next shot is a conveyor belt of bodies, and it's just like, well, I guess that's it.
It's mad, isn't it? Who thinks these are good? But the thing is, I feel like people who the team that put together trailers, they don't have the director involved. These are people who are, they're there to try and sell the movie, and they have the whole film to use.
Terminator 5. The plot twist in Terminator 5 is that the one of the good guys turns into a bad guy. He turns into a robot, and that's in the trailer.
I know.
Him going, "Hello, it's nice to see you. I'm a robot now."
Yeah, it's so irritating.
And the director,
was so irritated by
the director himself was like, "Yeah, I don't know why they did that."
Yeah. Oh, because that really just took so much away from the film. Because you go through a lot of the film being like, "Oh,
where's John Connor? Is John Connor okay?"
Yeah.
Oh, but if you've seen the trailer, you know he's a robot in the first minute. So
yeah. I feel like I almost want there to be a rule where the trailer can't use any footage from the film. How good would that be if they had to sell it off of like a side skit or something?
Well, like, this is a bad example because it's an animated film, but the trailer for one of the first trailers for Toy Story 3 I saw was just the toys constructing the Toy Story 3 logo out of like lights and stuff, and then Buzz Lightyear comes along and his one's like way better, and Woody's all like, what would Toy Story 3 be without Buzz Lightyear? A good movie. Like, nothing to do with the plot, none of the new characters, none of the final scenes. And the thing is as well, like
Wall-E was the same actually. Wall-E did use stuff from the film, but it only used stuff from the first 10 minutes of the film. Like it showed off like the ruined Earth. It didn't go into like all the. It didn't even show that.
Here's Eva holding a plant.
Yeah, exactly. No. It's more just a hook.
But the thing is, they want to make. I understand it. They want to make the film look more dramatic than it is. So include the most dramatic scenes. Everyone knows that the drama is either at the start or the end of the film.
And it's this weird thing with just, I guess it's this whole artistic integrity versus the money making side of it. And for me, it's actually because I think we spent a long. Let's not touch on Marvel too much, but because we definitely nailed that last week. But that's one of the things that I kind of want to hate Marvel because they are big business and they are cash cow. But at the same time, they've kept up a lot of integrity, and that's what I really like about them. Like they've not on the trailer front, which we were discussing.
No, but part of that is that there's so many people just willing to push every single bit of Marvel movie information to their Facebook newsfeed at the drop of a hat.
Exactly, but this is what I kind of but Marvel have done a really good job of.
I'm now unfollowing people from Facebook who post Star Wars spoilers now. So if any of my Facebook friends are listening, it's a one strike policy, as in you do it once, you're gone. We'll still be friends, but you'll just never know.
Yeah.
Oh, Aiden doesn't like or comment on my stuff. Oh.
That's
change there.
You look back like a year ago, and it's like, oh yeah, I posted that Star Wars.
Oh yeah, you posted one thing about Rey's identity. See ya.
Yeah, bye. Yeah, but anyway, yes, I just find it like ruins the experience for me. Like, it's a real shame that they do it.
Yeah, I like enjoying things the way that the artist wanted them to be enjoyed.
Yeah, and I think it's more enjoyable walking out. It's just. Sometimes you just get this sense, and this goes back to the echo chamber thing. This really does. You get this sense that these idols or these basically you're being told what to do by. And I really don't want to sound like one of these people who's like, oh, the media's controlling the pop, because I don't think it's that well coordinated. I don't think anyone's coordinating this in such a big. There's an evil guy in a chair.
They're worried about getting fired.
This is basically just an emergent property. So this is what I'm saying. It's like I don't think there's the man, or if there is, the man is a lot of collective like
the men
with
Ven.
Yeah. I just feel like it's just something that's happened. It's because of it's almost like a natural selection thing, right? It's just the most sensationalist news stories get clicked on, and then that gets more and more. So there's no one like trying to drive an agenda really. Like you get it, you obviously see it sometimes, but I find that's often very see-through. But this is just how things have happened. A lot of people are naturally right, a lot of people are naturally left, and I feel like it's because of the system that's set up to like reward that. That's why it just drives people in those two different directions.
Yeah, I mean.
There's no one sitting there going, oh, it'd be great if we...
But where I think it does become problematic is where you have someone who feels like they are inclined to be a little bit left-wing or a little bit right-wing because of one or two views that they have, is then basically, because all of their friends are right-wing people or
Yeah.
left-wing people who agree with them, they just start agreeing to their shit without thinking about it or processing it themselves.
And I definitely agree it's a bad thing, but I also don't think there's... And that's... I just want to avoid sounding like I'm a conspiracy nut who thinks there's some puppet. Like, there isn't. I think it's just the way things have ended up, and I think...
I think it's the Bilderberg group.
What?
The Bilderberg group?
Not heard of it.
It's a real thing. It's like a bunch of... Basically, it's a real group that exists. They have these secret meetings in different countries, and people theorize that, like, they're discussing how to control the world at these meetings. A bunch of, like, really famous, rich American people, like, and a bunch of British politicians.
I have heard about them.
Ed Balls is one of them.
Of course, Ed Balls.
There's Ed Balls. There's a great video of, do you know Alex Jones, the conspiracy guy?
No.
What? You don't know
Alex? Like, he rings a bell. But anyway, yeah, go.
He goes on BBC Sunday Politics and he's like, "You remember Ed Balls? I know you're a member of the Bilderbergers. 1776.
Wow, damn.
Yeah, he's like this. Alex Jones is a big part of this as well because he's InfoWars. He's responsible for that sort of media hubbub. You ever seen any videos by Paul Joseph Watson?
The thing is, it really rings a bell, like the name, but I'll look him up afterwards.
Imagine, so this is Paul Joseph Watson. Imagine a very angry, schmuck-looking white guy stood in front of a map of the world going, "The problem with leftists is that in this election..." Like, and that guy is a scumbag.
I don't think there's enough northern people in the world.
I think there are too many. There's too many of everything.
Yeah, there's too much stuff, isn't there?
There's a lot of stuff.
There is a lot of stuff. Do you remember when there was nothing? No. That is a great sketch. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I think... part of me just... The way that's the thing that makes me laugh most about a lot of conspiracy theorists, is I think it just gives people too much credit. I mean... Yeah,
like, if they're controlling the water and putting chemicals in to make everyone stupid... What, do they get their own bottled water all the time?
This is the thing is, like, I just think it gives people too much credit. I feel like it's just a lot of, like, there are a lot of people making a lot of decisions, and in general, humanity's going into a certain direction. And that's basically how I feel about it all.
It's like people who think that the American government did 9/11.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if they were going to go to that length to like, get into a war, why wouldn't they just falsify there being some weapons of mass destruction and save themselves looking like absolute dicks?
But also, like, at the end of the day, so you've got these, like, conspiracy theorists, and there's, like, such weak evidence to support it and everything, and they're basically saying, like, this is a cover-up, blah, blah, blah. And yet the government, like, so incompetent all the other times. It's almost like saying, if they've managed to cover that up so well, all of this is intentional. I refuse to believe it.
The great part of a conspiracy theory is when it becomes self-fulfilling.
Yeah.
So you can go, all of that stuff that we find out about the government being incompetent, that is a false flag. That's them saying, we're incompetent, we couldn't pull this stuff off.
Yeah, exactly.
They're looking like they're stupid to cover up how smart they are.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but...
I love conspiracy theories. Don't believe them, but I love them.
No, I love them as well. Like, I will, like... Sometimes I just find myself... Like, there's that whole, like, just ending up too deep down the rabbit hole on YouTube moments where it's 2 a.m. and you've just clicked the recommended links following on from a video. And you just...
That's another quite, like, Big Brother-esque experience. The YouTube recommended tab.
Yeah, it is. But... just falling down that rabbit hole, you just end up in some weird places. And I've before just ended up watching some really rubbish documentary where I'm basically watching it just going, this is rubbish. But, like, there's just
where are they going to go next?
Yeah, like, where, like, how... Oh, of course he said that. Of course he's, like, the aliens, like, came down and made Egypt at the start of time.
They shoved a light in Obama's face and he blinked funny. He must be a lizard.
Yeah, the lizard people conspiracy. I just... It's kind of magical, like, what people come up with. And because it's basically fantasy, right? Like, it's all basically fiction.
Yeah.
And so you can almost enjoy it from that perspective. It's like...
Yeah, I mean, I really like Metal Gear Solid because of how daft and ridiculous the plot is.
Yeah.
So if you can tell me that, like...
And for me, it's even sweeter the fact that someone believes it. Like, it's like... there's that craziness to it. It's what appeals to me almost about Scientology. I'm like, this is so insane. And so, like, it's literally... Oh, hey, like, there's this religion. And they go, oh, okay, like, what's the evidence? Go... Well, a sci-fi writer wrote it. And they go, okay, and then actually change their life in any sort of meaningful way to follow that.
But the fascinating thing about Scientology was like over the last 10 or 15 years, like all of that stuff through like South Park and Louis Theroux and these big things in the media, like we all know that that's what the basis of Scientology is.
Yeah.
But when Scientology was at its peak, they would get people to like confess their feelings and hold on to these two metal things. And so you have to be as brutally honest about yourself as possible. Yeah. And there's someone recording it. And while you're going through, so you're going through these layers and you're getting deeper and deeper into it, and they go, like after a certain amount of time or money, they say, okay, now we're going to share with you what the secret of Scientology is. And at the point where they say, so a sci-fi writer came up with this idea that the souls of human beings are aliens from another dimension that got thrown into a volcano by Lord
so far
Xenu.
Emotionally invested.
Well, also, if you're Tom Cruise, they've got video footage of you holding onto these two things and saying, I really want some cocks, but I can't have them. So, like, they go, well, if you say how silly this is, we're going to, and it could be worse stuff than that.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's obviously a reason why Scientology has become as successful as it is. There's a lot of psychology behind it. There's a lot of people speaking about, because essentially, it's a lot of the reason why a lot of it's the reason why a lot of religions work is because it's basically a psychology. Like, so if you are of the train of thought that they're not real, which I'm of that thinking, then what it means is, but it doesn't mean that people that don't believe in it, however ridiculous I find that. So there must be a reason why people believe in it, and it must be a case of psychology, right? And it's lots of really interesting things. Like, I mean, on the most simple level, obviously, a lot of people are just scared of death, and they like the idea of that. So they, that's like one level. But then there's all like it's like psychological tricks they use to, like, Jehovah's Witnesses. It's almost like quite culty. They're like, fear the end of the world, and it's through fear they keep people engaged. And then it's like things like, oh, you can't like marry outside of Jehovah's Witnesses or you'll be disowned, and they will disown people. There's all these just like psychological tricks they employ to keep people in there. And it's the same with like Scientology. Is this like, there's something euphoric in admitting it's because it's the same reason why people go to therapy, right? Because it's helpful to them.
Do you not think that there are a lot of comparisons between the way that religions operate on a psychological level and like the new modern version of political correctness and social justice?
Yeah. Like,
you could wrestle your entire life with, am I a good person? Am I a bad person? How do I stay on the straight and narrow? And then someone can come along and they go, okay, all you need to be a good person is do this, don't say this, think about things in this way. Yeah. And in a way, like, you don't have to wrestle with your own complex emotions on what's right or wrong, because you're getting told by someone else that your behaviour is good just based on what they want. And
on a more just primal level, I think that is just how people are. I think people naturally are about groups, and they're about this idea of purpose. Like, that's a big driver. Like, religion really is a mix of this, like, wanting to feel there's a purpose, like having a reason for things, wanting to belong, and that's what it offers. And like, you see that same. It's not exclusive to religions. Like, fair enough, they were the things that like really like went big with it, but it's the same reason why you've got consoles. I mean, I'm not being funny, but it is, right? Like, I've invested in this thing. I know all about this thing. The other thing, I can't possibly have made a mistake with this. Like, all my friends do this, and
it's not me. It's the children who are wrong.
Yeah, it's like, and so and then you hate the other console, and like, your pro is always better than their pros. It's just, I mean, that's such a silly example, but you just see that all throughout society. Like, people just group in these really weird things, and they get so passionate about it, and because it's fun being passionate about something, right? Like, being passionate about things is a good thing, but when people let that clash with other people and become tribal, that's where it gets really stupid.
Yeah, I agree. I was playing Pokemon Go the other day, and it struck me how political that game is. Basically, you're either a member of the red team or the blue team, and you're constantly fighting for control of these little areas that sometimes go to the yellow team, but never for long.
Yeah. That pretty much, like, especially with the colours and the fact that we're approaching the election, it's very appropriate. Like, you got blue and red, and then yellow is just in there like,
hey, we exist.
Do you remember when we were in the coalition? Do you remember? Yeah, we raised tuition fees, which was one of our main policies. Weren't good. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if I should talk about this. I haven't signed anything that says that I shouldn't talk about this, but oh man, I'm making it sound so important. Anyway, a couple of weeks ago,
sounds way too important.
I've totally overhyped it.
There's no way you're important enough for anything like that.
A couple of weeks ago, I did some telesales work for a company who were surveying people on behalf of the Liberal Democrats.
Oh, right.
So it was my job to ring people up and say, hello, are you interested in voting for the Liberal Democrats? Who do you vote for? Why do you vote for them? Blah, 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 blah. And at one point, so like some of the stuff that you get is like, I have never forgiven you for forming that coalition. It's like, I was, and you can't say this, but I was like, I was against that too, stupid. Like, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't want that to happen. I'm just here on behalf of them. But it's amazing how, the point of this is like, it's amazing how much faith people have lost in that one party just based on what was effectively Nick Clegg's decision.
But the thing is, though, and it wasn't really Nick Clegg's decision. So my opinion on that whole piece is it was a coalition. There were two parties in there, and the bigger one, the one that actually had the majority vote, were the Conservatives, and that was their policy, was raising tuition fees.
Of course, yeah. But
so I get that, like, people are annoyed they back down, but the way Lib Dem saw it is that if they were to have any sway, they had to, like, not just be resistant. There was loads of other things they wanted to get in, and they did eventually get in. That were pretty good, and it was the reason why that coalition wasn't full Tory and it wasn't as bad as it is now.
But it was Nick Clegg's decision to make the talking point of the election before.
Yes.
Massive thing on education.
It definitely was a mistake for them to back down on that policy. Out of all the policies they could have backed down on to become a compromising party, that was a bad one.
Yeah. Especially because it affects a generation of growing voters.
And there's no going back now. And that's the problem, is they were such a popular party, and now people won't look at them twice.
I think it's amazing that UKIP is kind of, well, not anymore based on the most recent results, but sort of in terms of coverage and relevance.
Yeah, they definitely got more coverage than the Lib. But the thing is, that was such a defining moment for the Lib Dems. They finally
I couldn't tell you who's in charge of the Lib Dems right now. I know that Paul Nuttall's for other reasons.
Paul Nuttall's of the UKIPs. But this is it, right? Like, Lib Dems had fought for so long to get any sort of power and recognition. They got it, and they had their demographic were young people, and the thing they chose to back down on was the thing that affected their audience. And so they boned themselves. Like, it's just ridiculous.
And people are still angry about it now.
Of course you would be. Like, you've got a lot, and I think a lot of those voters will carry that going forwards. Like, into their adult voting lives. So, they've gone through uni. They've ended up, they're carrying around 21 grand of debt, and the way they see it is, it wasn't the Tories and their policy that did it, even though it basically was. It was the fact that the Lib Dems could have done something to stop it. They had faith in them, and they let them down.
It's this idea of othering. So I watched a film called Accidental Courtesy, and this is a documentary about this black guy in America who goes around, and he basically, through talking and engaging with members of the KKK, he's been responsible for over 200 people leaving the KKK.
Yeah.
And because he says in the film, a lot of this stuff is horrible, but it comes from ignorance. They've never met a black person, so they just believe all this stuff because they're in the bubble, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
And so his question is, how can you dislike me when you don't know me? And he takes that question to them, and gradually over time, it's caused these people to reassess everything about how they see people and how they see race. And one of the things in the film that's very interesting is that he meets up with some members of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And Black Lives Matter are like, no, we would never talk to these people. These people are bad, blah, blah, blah. Like, they're angry at Daryl Davis, who's the guy in the documentary. They're angry at him, but they're not angry. They're more angry at him than they are at the KKK, and the KKK want to kill them. Yeah. They feel betrayed by him because he's supposed to be
on their side,
one of them. Yeah, and it's a similar thing. Like, as a liberal voter would be more angry at the liberals in that situation because they expect the conservatives to fuck them.
You expect, exactly. Like, and this is kind of again, we're just full of pop culture references, but it's like the whole why Harvey sides with the Joker, right? Is because the Joker is basically like, hey, look, he talks about the idea of a plan, and when everything goes to plan,
the cops have a plan.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's fine with it, but then the moment that this sort of little chaotic thing happens, everyone loses their minds, and it's that same thing as people expect, like you say, the Tories to screw us over, but they had faith in that other. So when they trip up once, that has more traction than just something where I expected that to happen. What do you expect is the Tories, isn't it? And that it's a really weird.
It doesn't always hold hold 100% true though. It's not always that you are more angry at.
Oh no, of course, Black Lives Matter are definitely anti-KKK, and liberals are definitely anti-Tory.
Oh, you just got super loud there.
Sorry, I got very passionate.
No, like what I mean is when you have, like members of one group defending the awful behavior of other people because they're in their group.
Yes.
Like, I can't get past this. The fact that there's still an article on The Independent that says Emma Watson isn't a hypocrite for being a feminist and not paying her taxes. I can't get past it.
We should have like a swear jar, but it's that story.
It's just insane.
Yeah, I know.
Like, and it's, to me, it's the perfect example of how your group becomes more important than the ideology that your group is based on.
And I think the way that, and so we're 50 minutes in, so this is like I feel like we're in a good place to start winding it down. But basically, I think for me, where I see it heading is we need to remove the power that's. So the reason this works is because sensational things get clicks, and therefore it's driven it to become more and more sensationalized and more polarizing. And basically what you need to do is remove the need for them to do clickbaity things and essentially go the way of more of like a paid service. So you pay so much a month and they're going to get that no matter what they put out. So they might as well put out truth. So like you essentially have a news service where, you know, people pay so much a month and they're relying on you for accurate, truthful information, and they don't get any more money for the more sensational the news story is.
Yeah.
Just by reporting it accurately, they're delivering the service they promised for that monthly cost. And that's like a situation where I can see it being beneficial, because the moment that you let how sensational it is affect like how much they earn, that's why they go for those stories and why they, you know, clickbait with the headlines and they maybe don't fact check as much.
And sometimes I think that sometimes these people write the articles for people who don't agree with them. Like sometimes I think that maybe that Emma Watson feminist article
is to draw people
to get me going in their comment section going, I can't believe you did that. You're a terrible feminist.
On average, per person who's read that,
that was some prop comedy there.
Yeah, very good. You've probably visited that page more. Like, so let's say you take all the people who've read it, and then you, for each of those people, you record how many times they visited that page. You've probably given them more clicks.
But let's go back to my point earlier about always use ad blocker.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Always use ad blocker.
Always use ad blocker.
I think the way forward is that those people, because basically they are hacks. Like their time is running out, and I think that we need more people like Philip DeFranco.
Yeah.
Where, like, because the problem isn't bias, because you're always going to have some level of bias. But if you can acknowledge when your bias is there, and so like Philip,
try and be objective, and then when you're stating an opinion, say that's my opinion.
Well, like so Philip DeFranco with the Daddy 05 stuff, like he quite clearly was covering that issue because his bias is that he wanted to talk about a story of child abuse. That's important to him.
Because he's been abused, yes.
And that's why he gave it that high up thing. What it wasn't was him saying, this is child abuse because I want it to be a story about child abuse.
Yeah.
And
he chose, his bias meant that was what he covered the most and the most passionately. But you're right, he wasn't making up facts or sensationalizing it.
Yeah.
He just picked that up. But yeah, and I agree. And it's this kind of. And so for me, that's where, you know, if we're going to have this success, there needs to be an appetite for the truth within society, which I think there's becoming, that people want to get away from fake news, etc. And then the way to achieve that is by providing a service that is accurate and as factual as possible. And basically, for them to be able to survive, they need to be able to have an unbiased income. They need to be able to have income, whether they're sensational or not. And that's where I think sort of, but Philly D is a great example because he's of course launching his own show, and things like Patreon really help that. You know, he no longer needs to go, I didn't get that many views on this video. He goes, I got this many monthly subscribers. There is the argument that to drive monthly subscribers up, he might be sensationalist, but what he could do then is he can have like a section of the show that isn't news, it's an entertainment thing. People will pay monthly for that, and then hear news on the site. You know, you've got all these other sort of avenues, and I think we're heading to a good place with it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I never thought that I would take PewDiePie's side in anything.
I was surprised when I did as well.
I've known of the guy for 6 years, and in those 6 years, like I maybe saw 5 minutes of PewDiePie, and he was playing a horror game, going, "Oh, I'm so scared. it's got me, it's raping me, it's raping me. And I was like, well, this is unpleasant, so I'm just not going to listen to this or pay attention to this. And then somehow the guy gets massively popular, and then, and then they hit him with this whole, you're a Nazi thing. And I'm like, okay, one, you're probably like you're doing the typical media thing of lying about it, but also two, this guy was getting millions of subscribers while shouting about like rape jokes and horrible.
And that's not what they pick up on. Like.
But that was 6 years ago. Like, if you're the media, you're supposed to be better than me.
Yeah.
If I was 6 years ahead of you on the story that hey, PewDiePie does some kind of contentious and provocative things in his videos, like,
what are you for?
It's old news, and as a result of that, the people that were with PewDiePie knew that was his style of comedy, so no one cared.
Yeah.
And then you've got J.K. Rowling going, well, I think this is probably racism. And all of Twitter going, J.K. Rowling, like...
She wrote Harry Potter, didn't she? Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
Everyone was just like, oh yeah, Harry Potter and the Echo Chamber of Secrets. But, like, everyone comes out and goes, you're wrong, J.K. Rowling, like, there's more to this.
And instead of admitting fault, she just dug deep. It's just so, I think it's annoying because
like, she's had an entire lifetime of saying sassy things to Piers Morgan and people going, yes, you slay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's hey, Harry Potter.
Yeah, and was that a part of this?
No, that was just before that. So that was just for you, that bit. I don't actually hate Harry Potter, guys, but we were doing a mic test earlier and something about Harry Potter came up and I was like, don't like Harry Potter.
I said Peter Pettigrew to test my pops.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, I think it was a pretty neat discussion. Didn't really touch on movies too much this time.
No, this was a bit... I think it's better when we just ramble because trying to stay on one thing is difficult for me.
Yeah. I quite agree. Anyway.
So, let's end, as we begin, with another rendition of... They are going to taste great. Everybody knows that they're going to taste great. With Tony, my mate, even ladies with a personalised number plate. And your teenage brother who's out on a date. Goodbye.